purports to be a possible rescue plan for this system, assumes further indebtedness beyond an already terminal sum of indebtedness. So now, I guess I could stop there and take your question, Al, or Jim, whoever it was there.
Go ahead, Al. Al, are you with us?
I had to unmute myself.
That's fine. You go ahead, Al.
Okay. The question I have is, how does the bank assert principle, that they're lending principle, on what basis, unless that's a direct fabrication of the facts? What do they do?
Well, it is a direct fabrication of the facts, as I mentioned when I asserted earlier, and let's explain to the audience what an assertion is. In any genuine science, mathematics, if we have a Pythagorean theorem, for instance, which says, that the sum of the squares of the sides of a right triangle equal the square of the hypotenuse, an assertion would be just to say, no, it doesn't. That it may be plausible, because let's say 90% of the students in the classroom can't understand how that could possibly be, that the square of the hypotenuse always equals the sum of the squares of the sides of a right triangle. How many people actually intuitively understand that immediately? I mean, you're one in hundreds of millions of people if you understand that intuitively, immediately. But it's just an assertion to just contradict what's actually a fact. But the thing that an assertion is, it's an offering of an idea as if it should hold water, but not providing the arguments which make it hold water. But in the case of a veritable science is comprised entirely of proofs of theorems. So there isn't just one proof of the Pythagorean. In fact, there are, I don't know how many there are. There's dozens of them. And so it is with virtually all of the rules of geometry, which precipitate in trigonometry, and all of the rules of math are likewise. They're concrete. They're indisputable. They aren't matters of opinion. 2 + 2 = 4. Well, now, in order to understand the question that Al's just asked, which is really at the center and the heart of these issues, we really need to understand a promissory obligation, and that is all money. It's very difficult for people to understand this, and I should probably confess, once I did these 3 categoric faults, this was the final issue. How then, we can solve all the issues of a monetary system easily by second-grade mathematics. No reasonable mathematician in the world would ever even dream of disputing the proof of singular integral solution that we have just offered. So there is one mathematically perfected economy. And it extends, in fact, into this area of the question that Al has just asked, which is, how must money come into circulation? Well, so there was one. This was the final thing that I had to finish off to know that I had conceived of a mathematically perfected economy, or a singular integral monetary solution. And there's a tremendous amount of thinking that's involved in conjuring test situations for how money can come into circulation. You can just spend it into circulation. And in fact, one of the most plagiarized essays in monetary history is my 1975 Parable of Perfect Economy, where I provide actually just a mere story of colonial currency. And I have 2 cases. One where I provide an example of the natural life cycle of a promissory obligation, and in the second example I give, of only 2, I deviate from that, and I provide for government to fund itself even without taxation by merely spending money into circulation. Well, the latter example has a fatal fault, and I use it as a teaching vehicle. Of course, many years, even 1975 was, 7 years after coming up with this idea of mathematically perfected economy, in a flash of, profound thinking. But in order to be certain that there is one and one only mathematically perfected economy, the issue that Al has just raised is the final matter that we have to resolve. That is, how does money come into circulation? Well, I think the quickest way to understand something that still requires us to ruminate on considerably before we can become as comfortable with it as its mathematical implications ascertain. And that is that what was wrong with the second example that I gave in my parable of perfect economy, which I might even read for the audience if we want to take a break for that. But I will just mention at this point that every cent, what was wrong with this second example is that it's inflationary. You can't continue to spend money into circulation to fund government when the infrastructures deteriorate and may become defunct or whatever. But they have a lifespan, and it's vital to maintaining the integrity of the circulation to maintain a perpetual one-to-one relationship, as we've already said, between remaining circulation and remaining value of represented property. This is the very thing that Ron Paul supporters complain about and Ron Paul complains about. But the only way to accomplish it is mathematically perfected economy. And Paul, of course, has advocated, a multitude of actually conflicting propositions, returning to the gold standard, competing banks. We already have competing banks. He's advocated that higher rates of interest would have prevented us from borrowing excessively, when of course if we merely maintain a vital circulation, as I've just proven or repeated the proof that I originally provided my high school teacher, then higher rates of interest of course multiply the escalation of artificial indebtedness all the faster. So this issue is that I give in this second example of parable of perfect economy, that merely spending money into circulation is inherently inflationary. It destroys the object of an immutable currency, which is absolutely imperative to adhere to maintain the integrity of any currency. So it's something that we can't do mathematically, but the reasons that we can't do it are very simple and readily understood. The fact of the matter is that every unit of circulation has to have attached to it an equal obligation to retire it from circulation relative to expiration, consumption, or depreciation of the related property. This and this alone solves all the monetary issues. But what are we faced with then in the end? If we merely spent the money into circulation, we would potentially suffer the costs of government through inflation. So we're not really relieving ourselves of anything. Moreover, then we understand that economy or an economic system can neither be a free lunch. Now, today, it's at least an inadvertently terminal system of exploitation. It isn't a system of exploitation. That's intentional. It's purposed. If you've stood in my shoes for the past 43 years, every time a Paul Volcker or an Alan Greenspan or Ben Bernanke utters a word purporting to explain whatever is going on, I see in it purposed, veiled lies. These people know what they're doing. They may believe, as a matter of ego, that somehow they can preserve this system. But this is something that we, as a free people, cannot allow them to merely experiment with. They have to be held accountable, defend.
You know what that
I'm getting a silent in my ears here.
There, I got it.
was that somebody deliberately trying to?
Yes, I got him. So.
Well, I note that it happened as Michael talked about the brazen liars that we've seen representing the Fed on TV for the last 30 years.
Well,
Go ahead, Dee Dee.
The listeners might.
Yeah, I will. Steve.
Hold on, Dee Dee. What did you want to say?
Steve wants to take a short break, and so if you could hold that thought, Mike, we'd appreciate it. We'll be right back with you.
Okay, great, Dee Dee.
Thank you.
Okay, welcome back, everybody. This is Jim Conda Jr. standing in with Dee Dee Farrell and Steve Harris hosting for Fred Smart tonight. My co-host tonight is Al Jordan, and the guest is Mike Montagne of the Mathematically Perfected Economy. Mike, continue, but when you come to a resting point, I'd like to ask you a few questions in case anyone in the audience is getting lost on the big picture here, because I'd like to ask you a few questions on what would practically be done tomorrow if you could take over Congress said we pass a law that Mike Montagne is going to start directing how we issue money. I'd like to ask you a few questions on that, but go ahead and continue where you are.
Great. That's a good question. I'm very well prepared to answer that unequivocally. I would say with the greatest amount of certainty that is humanly possible, because the matters are simple math. What we really need to understand for the people to get their brains around all this so far is now the obfuscation of the currency. And I don't know. I could just read my my parable of perfect economy. It's pretty short. I don't know. It's a few hundred words. And being as we do have enough time to cover it, it would be well, it's an important story. Understand, this is one of the most plagiarized monetary essays anywhere. Last I searched, there was 25,400,000 pages which have borrowed this essay as if it was actual history. Understand that this is a mere story. It is not history. And the words of Mike Montagne in it are issued to the fictional mouth of Benjamin Franklin. So this,
Mike, before you read that, could I ask you a few of these questions, and then you could read the parable?
Well, whatever. Go ahead.
Okay. If you were starting to direct the U.S. economy tomorrow, would you shut down?
No, that question, I'll get to it. That we have to understand what's wrong still. The people have no idea what the obfuscation of the currency is. We have to understand what the obfuscation of the currency is, and this story is a launching point from which to understand what the natural and only just lifespan of a promissory obligation is. This is the thing that we have to understand, Jim, because the rest of my talk would be meaningless without this.
Your parable addresses that.
Yes, it provides an example, and having given the example, I can tell what is I can elaborate on what is correct and what is.
Okay, so you want to read the parable now then.
Yeah, it's easier than trying to recite all this stuff. And I mean, I used to give this story off the top of my head just constantly. I would tell it since 1975 on. But anyway, the title of it is Parable of Perfect Economy, and it's available in this very form on my web pages to this very day. In fact, I even provided it to the Reagan campaign and later first Reagan administration, and extensive documentation that I gave that in which I argued that mathematic proofs that Reagan's provisions, proposed solutions would fail. My computer models even projected, as came true, that he would triple the